When? Hello and welcome to this event from Cedar Land, Imagining a Fossil Fuel-Free Future. Try saying that with a bag of crisps in your mouth. And welcome as well to our online audience. Everyone is welcome. As I say, this is organised by Cedar Land, which is part of the Scottish Ecological Design Association. It's the last in a series. The previous ones have focused on bioproducts, what can be done in Scotland, what can be achieved with the idea of inspiring people to achieve more in the bioeconomy. Today, it's about looking at what the government can do, what the government can do to help, to encourage, to enable, but maybe not just the government, other public sector organisations, how they can come in and help the wider bioeconomy thrive. The key findings are important because reports will be written and it will go back to the Scottish Government and inform their just transition plan for land use and agriculture, as well as the Scottish National Adaptation Plan, and also it will be used by the government for the wider climate policies that they will be coming up with. I should say something about myself first. I'm Nick Draney. My background is in journalism, in news journalism originally. I was the news editor of The Scotsman and after that The Times in Scotland. I now focus as a freelance journalist on rural Scotland, and that means I write about anything from, I write walking guides, I write about issues in rural Scotland. And that can be anything from fish farms to managing deer population, peatland restoration to the health of our rivers. So although I'm something of an outsider today, I've got a vested interest in the bioeconomy. I believe that, and I hope, and the bioeconomy needs to become the new normal. And fossil fuel reliance needs to be something that future generations will read about in history books rather than live. The format today is similar to previous events. It's all about discussion. There'll be input welcomed from everyone, and we will have provocations from panelists. It's not a series of speeches. It's people are here to discuss and come up and agree and disagree with policy and ideas. There will be a 5-minute comfort break, so people don't need to sit down for the whole 2.5 hours. The online audience, you can use the chat box to ask questions, and we will get to you when we can with them. We'll also hopefully be having some provocations from some online attendees. And finally, there will also be interludes from some artists that we're quite pleased to have with us in person and online. They've collaborated because of their interest in the environment and the bioeconomy, and we're pleased that Tom Lyne, musician, and Sophie Cook, poet, will be able to premiere some of their works. Anyway, that's enough preamble. Let's get on with talking. To start, I'd like to bring in Ian Archer. Hello, Ian. Ian is the CEO of BioConnect Innovation Centre in County Monaghan in Ireland. But Ian, I think I'm right in saying that you used to do a similar role in Scotland at the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, but you've moved across the water now, and so I thought it'd be interesting if you could tell us a little bit about what your work is, but also what can Scotland learn from Ireland, and what can Ireland learn from Scotland?
Sure. So I should say one of the reasons I moved was I wasn't doing a similar role. It was a promotion. I wasn't the CEO at the
right. Okay.
At iBioSC, and actually Liz sitting next to me here. Liz is one of the directors at iBioSC as well. I was the technical director, and Liz is. What's got the job title wrong? It's more complicated than mine, but it's more business engagement director. Is that right? So yeah, I moved to Ireland. I moved to this job in Ireland back in August of last year. It seemed like an interesting opportunity, and at the time I thought it was going to be doing something creating something similar to what we set up in Scotland. In Ireland, it's turning out to be something different. We might get there eventually, but it's kind of interesting just to see the differences between what Scotland has done from a policy and a kind of funding sense, and what's happening in Ireland. So, what happened in Scotland from the Industrial Biotech Innovation Centre? So, it was created just over 10 years ago to promote industrial biotechnology. The idea of the first thing people always would say to us when we talk about industrial biotechnology is, "What's industrial biotechnology?" I didn't really have any idea what it was, and eventually I got to the point of saying it's just making stuff using biology. It's like keep it as simple as possible. That's kind of what it was, finding, and that could be through some kind of fermentation process, but it could be taking something that exists naturally and then converting it into something of higher value. So that's kind of any of the technology associated with that. And then, so 10 years ago, actually, what was the driver in Scotland was actually the chemical industry. It was or associations within the chemical industry. So and the life sciences life sciences Scotland and Chemical Sciences Scotland were the organisations that pushed for this idea that we should be doing something a bit different in the chemical industry in particular, and we should be, if we used this biotech route for making the same stuff, you should be able to drive all sorts of benefits, and most obviously ones around sustainability and carbon in particular. My slides have kind of got a bit messed up on here, but there's a good. These next two slides kind of give. Okay. The next two slides give a kind of a really easy. I like these the figures on here. So jump one back, please. So that first one. So my arrows have gone a bit messy on this, but basically, if you took one example in the chemical industry at the moment of a chemical, and polyethylene is the largest chemical that we make anywhere in the world. It amounts to about a third, maybe a bit more of the weight of the chemical industry. When we make polyethylene, for every ton we make, we actually emit 2 tons of CO2. And that's kind of just the way it works when we do this. We're making millions of this. It will be something along the lines of about 150, maybe 180 million tons a year. So that gives you a scope for how much that is. Next slide shows we can do this slightly differently. And actually, you can make it from sugar beet in Scotland. If you can do that, you would convert that sugar into ethanol, and then you convert ethanol into ethylene, into polyethylene. When you do that, you capture 2 tons of CO2. Rather than emit 2 tons of CO2. So I love this because they're such easy numbers to remember. It's the biggest chemical that we make. It's the cheapest chemical we make as well, near enough. But if you make it, the way we make it at the moment, we emit 2 tons of CO2. If we did it this way, we'd capture 2 tons of CO2. And everyone can keep that in their heads. Ivan McKee said to me when I told him this in a meeting one time, "Ian, send me that in an email because I can use that all the time because it's something that's a really simple thing to get across." Ivan was our big supporter in the Scottish government. He was one of the ministers there. So that's the logic. That's why we want this bio-based chemical industry. That's the whole point of it. If we can mirror that across much of the rest of the chemical industry, but this is a big chunk of the chemical industry. So that's how Scotland came into this, and it was a big push by the chemical companies really to create this organisation, IBIOIC, that then would help to promote. And actually, the methodology the model that was put into place there was actually an industrial membership model. So we've ended up with a couple of hundred companies now, Liz. Yeah. I mean, Liz can talk a bit more about this as we go through. A couple of hundred companies now in the IBIOIC membership, who actually are the key value of the organisation now. The value of the organisation is access to that industry and being the voice of that industry. So that's the Scottish perspective. I think it's probably more appropriate if Liz talks about the kind of some of the successes of IBIOIC. Ireland's done it very differently, and Ireland's actually looked at it and said, we're already a bioeconomy. We're a rural bioeconomy. If you take out the likes of Amazon and the big pharma companies that are in there for whatever reason in Ireland, actually the rest of the economy is agriculture and agri-food. Northern Ireland, if you take Northern Ireland, it produces enough food for 10 million people, and it's got a population of 1.7 million people. And so, a lot of the pollution associated with that is left in Northern Ireland while we eat the chicken that comes over here. So there are big challenges in the rural economy in Ireland, and they see the bioeconomy as just a way of creating extra value from other things that are going on in that space. So they've literally come at it from the other end in Scotland. Yeah. What we did at IBIOIC was recognise eventually that the chemical industry might be driving, but you have to get back into the rural economy. Because we need sugar beet. If we're going to do this, we need sugar beet. So if you need sugar beet, you need to engage with farmers, and that's why. And so we started with industry and worked back into the rural economy. And Ireland, I think, has started with the rural economy and is trying to work out where it can go. But in some respects, it's kind of behind Scotland, and in other respects, I think it's quite a long way ahead.
And in order to do that with your organisation and your organisation, Liz, is it essential that there is government support? Because I get the impression from both organisations, they work on the basis that there is a big network. And yes, everyone wants networks, but you need help to get into a network and to get that network. So is that one of the ways?
Kind of beyond the stage where that early stage of research and innovation was happening. It was a spin out from Napier University led by Martin Tangney, and they'd got into the stages, the next bit I think you're alluding to there, Nick, where they were starting to struggle with scale up. And that was the problem. So they've done the lab work. The lab work works fine. It looks like it's going to be a process. They did a little bit of scale up work in facilities a bit like BioConnect, and there's a facility at Heriot Watt that iBioSC runs, to do the first kind of baby steps out of the lab to use equipment that you can scale to large scale. And then they effectively hit a wall at that point. They did some work in they had to go to Ghent, they had to go to Belgium actually to do one piece of work, and Switzerland to do another piece of work. But that at least proved their process could work. So that story up till now, that's probably taken 10 years for that little bit there to get to that point. And then and then they hit the wall of, well, the next step for them is a £20 million plant, and they couldn't get that funding. It took them a long time, and they've just recently built it. Obviously, the pandemic then messed up timings on that, but it took them a hell of a long time to get that 20 million. There was a significant amount of public support even to get to that point. There were grants they got in there, but there was also the private investment too. And even that's not a full-scale plant for them. They actually, to do this properly and to do the kind of thing I'm talking about up here, is probably in the hundreds of millions. It would cost. INEOS would be the kind of main driver here. They'd be the people that potentially would be, they'd be the end user of the materials, and they'd be making the polyethylene. You're looking at hundreds of millions to do that in a space where no one's really making massive amounts of money on it. So it's not a very investable opportunity. Farmers get an extra crop. They get some money from the sugar beet. They get some biodiversity. They like the idea of it. INEOS actually get to make the same product they normally make, probably slightly more expensive than they can currently make it using the fossil-based approach. But there are people who want sustainable plastics, so maybe you can charge a bit of a premium. But there's not masses of money in this. There's not a huge amount. So that means investment's difficult. But everybody wants the carbon savings. The farmers want carbon savings. If we can capture, so INEOS would basically emit, they would stop emitting 400,000 tons of CO2 from their current manufacture. They'd capture a further 400,000 tons of CO2, and there's value in that.
Yes.
And that's maybe where the governments have to do something. We have to monetize that value. It's got to make it so it's not just a purely financial decision here. We turn around and say, look, we will put some money into this. We'll put some funding towards this because we recognise there's a broader benefit that's spread across 100 farmers and farms and maybe a few companies. But that's the bit that's where we have to get to.
Okay, thank you. Pete, could I bring you in here? And I'll ask you a question and then invite you to do your provocation afterwards. I'd like to ask you, should we be looking at this in a different way? Should we not be looking at commercial expansion on a wide scale? Should we be looking more local?
So my name is Pete Ionetta from the James Sutton Institute. I'm a biologist and an agroecologist. Thanks, Ian, for the points you've made. I certainly, as an agroecologist, welcome crop diversification. I also welcome short value chains. I don't see that it's all about how you interpret industrial. So biotechnology can be used at different scales. So the question is, what scale do we choose to deploy it at? And absolutely, if you employ it at a very big scale, highly localized, the benefits will probably be localized, but that's not to say those benefits can't cascade across the country as well. So I don't think there's a single easy answer here, but with my agroecologist hat on, it's great to see crop diversification. I mean, the crop rotation in Scotland at the moment is barley, something else. And most of that we produce is not food, it is feedstocks for one process or another. And that's fine. The market is what it is, and it's a very complex world that we live in. Sugar beets of interest to me. Great crop. Would love to see the sugar beet industry re-established in Scotland. Just as an example, in relation to your question, but sugar beets are another crop that's really bad for the soil. And I would have some colleagues that would not want to see sugar beet back in Scotland because of the damage it does to the soil. So it's not about not having sugar beet, it's about how do we do it sustainably. So I certainly would like to see things at smaller scale and to see benefits shared with greater equitability wherever they're achieved using any biotechnological process. But to pick up on your last point, I thought it was interesting about the importance of, I think you alluded to the importance of cross-sector carbon accounting. So farming is often labelled as being a big polluter relative to some other industries. However, farming should be considered alongside forestry, should be considered alongside biotechnology. So when we're calculating carbon's footprint, it should maybe be considered from cradle to grave and not stop at accounting for the impact of farming at the farm gate.
Then that's a really good point. And when the work that we did at IBIOSC on the sugar beet was we started with farmers, and it was quite late on we actually managed to convince INEOS to pay attention. But when they did get interested, it was brilliant. I mean, but the main driver for the farmers was, we're so sick of being hammered for our carbon emissions. And I always think that's really unfair because we're the ones who are eating the farmers' food, right? Or we're drinking the beer that they're barley, whatever it might be. We're responsible for those emissions, not them, first off. I mean, they obviously can do everything they can. But what they were really looking for there, they recognised they weren't going to make millions. They're not going to become billionaires on the back of sugar beet, but they wanted to be able to show, or to at least to have some share of that carbon capture that I mentioned. And that was a really big driver for them and when we eventually spoke to Ineos had this idea that, well, what we'd do is there'd be a co-op to make the sugar beet, and actually Ineos might even be part of the co-op, and it would be this open book. It was a remarkable thing for Ineos to be suggesting. It's this sort of open book accounting model where we all share costs and we work out, and so you'll get a cost per acre of land or hectare of land that you're committing, and then maybe per ton of sugar beet plus some carbon. You know, as that, so you can count that against your carbon on your farm, which is so it just hopefully that kind of backs up.
Yeah.
Have you got any more of your provocation that you'd like to discuss while you have the floor?
Well, it depends. If you're using my PowerPoint later on, then...
No, we could use it now if you'd like.
Yeah.
This Pete's provocation.
Yeah, so I could... we could skip that. That's just a little bit about who I am. So you could move on. I've got 3 slides. I'm an individual who does an awful lot of work on pulses now. The format of these slides has changed a little with it coming on the screen here, but hopefully it will still make sense. The main point I want to make here is that I do a lot of my work in legumes. They're an underutilised crop. They're a forgotten species, largely. Okay. I'm fine.